This is Burn the Manual, brought to you by De Novo Digital. We're here to light it up.
Here we're rewriting the rules of business, branding, and culture. No cliches, no business speak, just real insights. If you've ever thought there's a better way to do this, there is.
All right, so what are we talking about?
So the rise of AI and SEO.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about talking about this one. I think, I was just at a conference and they were throwing around all the new like AEO and like I think I heard GEO and AIO and all this stuff, which I think is like, like what are we trying to sell exactly? Like
Right.
is what I'm trying to understand. Like what do we, we're throwing out all these terms and what do they mean and do we care at the end of the day? So so I'm excited to talk about it, but I'll let you, any thoughts on that?
It is an exciting time in SEO, I guess. And it always seems like it's a quote unquote exciting time in SEO.
Yeah.
Like I don't know when there's a time where you're like, oh, everything's basically just been the same.
Yeah.
But I think it's unique in that there are so many other, let's just say search engines, for better or worse.
Yeah.
Where people can get information that they weren't using before. Like Google it's still Google. Like they're still pulling AI, but there's basically AI communities being created where people can go and find answers and find tasks done that remove the initial thought of SEO, right? Like
Right.
You've got a website, you've got content, etc., but you just want an answer. Like that's essentially all search engines are designed to do, like from
Right, from the beginning.
Ask Jeeves was like, ask me a question. I will give you an answer.
Right.
So
Ask Jeeves, yeah.
like, that's the intent. So, people kind of got used to like, okay, I've got a question. It's going to give me 100 different answers and it's on me to find my own.
Right.
Now people are like, I just want the answer.
Yeah, and I think the same, I think about just how we Google, right? Like, I mean, you go into Google, you type in a query. If that query gives you the wrong information, you rewrite your query to try to like get like, oh, I see how it interpreted this word or whatever, right? And then you're like, I got to rewrite it because it's not what I meant. And the expectation is that I'm not going to, like that's why the top, spot really, maybe the top couple spots are actually valuable on Google as far as like people clicking on them, right? Because it's like, hey, Google gave me the right answer, and I clicked on them. And of course, Google's been like 50% like no click traffic, as it were, right? It's already trying to give you the best answer.
Yep.
So now, in theory, we're going to do something different so that AIs give us the best answer.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that I think is just not, like for AI to be valuable in theory, it has to catch up with like Google, if you will, on how to give a good answer to a question. And it may source it in different ways, but like at the end of the day, if it's using the internet for its like way to figure out what's a good source, what do we work on? Like backlinks and domain authority and like, it's like, what is it going to do? Brand awareness. Like, I mean, it's all the same thing. So like when you're talking about, to me, doing things like we have tons of clients with AI snippets, which is like feature snippets when we were trying to go after feature snippets for Google, right? And of course with Gemini being, part of the answers.
Yeah.
It's the same type of stuff. And without really doing anything that we didn't already do, you see results all the time as Google's search engine results page adds a Gemini section at the top for a result. You see your good content be part of that answer. And so I think the implication that you have to do a bunch of new stuff because AI is going to destroy SEO or whatever is like, I just think that's just totally wrong. Like, I think at the end of the day, to AI to be considered a valid source of truth, it's going to use the same information, maybe in a, maybe there'll be new ways for it to consider that information or parse that information or think about it. But all the stuff that we've been doing with, proper schema and proper, organizing your website right and internal linking and, anchor text and backlinks and, it's like all those things are still the things. Like, what's the new thing? Like, how does it decide that this is more important or more valuable, right? Like, we always, .gov websites or the .edu, it's like, what's the source that's going to make it more valuable as a backlink? Like, it's the same or more valuable. It's like, oh, it came from this one or this one. Like, those are my thoughts on it, I guess. And so it's funny, like, how we started inventing some new terms to be like AI optimized, but it's not different, it's not really, using Markdown versus, it has to be able to read HTML. I mean, the AIs are some of the best coders out there, becoming some of the best coders out there. If they can't figure out what's going on in an HTML file, like it's not going to be useful.
Yeah.
But that's we get off my soapbox for a second.
I think you brought up a few good points of like how search itself has evolved, right?
Yeah.
Like you asked it a question, and a lot of times, to start with, it would just give you answers.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started being like, well, did you mean this? Like, is this what you actually meant?
Yeah.
And it would show you those results. And now and then it was people also asked this thing.
Right,
so
right.
like now it's trying to figure out what you mean. And AI is a vastly advanced version of doing all of those things all
Right.
at once, right? It's like, okay, based on what you put in this prompt or in this query, we think you mean this, and here's some additional information about this that you didn't ask for, but here's how like we broke it all down,
Right.
And then like here's the analysis, so here's the answer we gave you. Here's different ways of thinking about it if this isn't the answer. And so I think that AI is taking all of the components that we already have from years of doing different ways of searching and going that step.
Yep.
Now, I think what the expansion of AI is, or assumption, I guess, at this point, is that it's going to be better at predictive modeling of what you need next. So you ask it a specific query, and Google and things are getting better at that now. Like if you're shopping for something,
Right.
say, I'll use baby stuff because we've had to buy a bunch of baby stuff. But like, if you are shopping for strollers, it's like, okay, well, you need this stroller, but you may need this attachment. And have you looked at these types of cribs, or have you looked at, the thing that we're looking at buying now is the wagon for the beach. Like, it'll start to put together like, well, here's, based on, and it should start to save it. So based on your preferences, based on how you like to do things, like here's some other information that you might need or might want.
Yeah.
And so how do you optimize for that?
Right.
But I agree with your point of like, there's only so far specific sources of information. So unless AI starts creating its own information, which has happened,
Right.
there's still truth in what's already existing.
Yeah, and I think all those are valid points. I think the biggest thing, as I think about it, is that something that I don't, there is like little tricks of using Google to the maximum extent, right? Like if you want to, don't show me these websites, or don't, I want to search within a specific site of a certain keyword or whatever. And there's different things that you can leverage. But one thing that I find is that, when it comes to the, information about things, like I think about diet a lot and things like that, right? Like, well, I have particular like nutritionists or particular like influencers or particular like thought processes that I think are valid. And so if I'm asking for a search result, I want it to only give me results that fall within the parameters of what I believe is like. I don't want you to tell me about things that I don't think are accurate, or things that are maybe mainstream, but isn't necessarily like I don't buy into necessarily. And so that's one of the things that I find that AI is really good at. At the same time, like I think that so that kind of opens up, the number one spot suddenly changes, if you will, if I suddenly bind it by like, okay, like I don't want to know. I want to, it's the same EEAT aspects of like, what does this group know, and are they an expert on this, or, do they have the authority and experience in these particular things? At the same time, like, is the, like, how I write that query in Google, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas prompts allow for way more context before you put in what your question is. Like consider yourself as in this situation with these belief systems, which these people is like your thing. These books is your like gold mine as far as like what you believe to be true about the world, and then answer this question that I'm trying to answer and put it out in this type of result. Like, whereas, again, the one thing about Google that you're constantly, kind of seeing is that it's constantly trying to better its SERP, like what's the, images and videos and, Gemini, it doesn't show up on every page. It shows up on the page that it thinks is going to give you the best result for what you're looking for. But, you can be so specific in what you want that query to like result page to look like. You can be like, I don't want to see it as this, or this, like put it in a spreadsheet because that's how I want to, grab this information. I think those things make it a great source for, when I'm asking questions and less about that, in those cases, like that is the, if anything, I think it steals some of Google's no-click traffic, right? Like like if I'm looking for a website, I don't go to AI, right?
Yeah.
Like I go to Google to find the website that or go to a specific place that I want more information from, or if I want to read a specific article from somebody specific, right? Like I won't necessarily leverage AI for that. But if I have those no-click questions that I want insight into, I feel like AI is a better tool. At the end of the day, though, I still think that when I put those parameters in, it needs to use that information to then bound. And again, it's going to, if it does its search into its database of websites and what it's been trained on and all these kinds of things, it's going to understand the parameters that I put in. But that data, if it checks itself or it looks back at what I put in as far as parameters go, I still think that technical SEO piece and whatever you did within the data that you put out on the internet that it was trained on, or in Reddit or in any of those places, like, are all going to be still, like, I just don't see, with there being a better resource because than what we already do. I think the only thing that I've seen recently is like LLMS.txt, which is like a robots.txt file, or like John Mueller says, like meta tags. So it's like, all right, like this is my suggestion on what you think you should care about on my stuff. But of course, with its training, it's going to be like, yeah, I don't care what you think. Like this is what's going on. And so that's where I kind of continue to feel like, practicing your owning the stuff that you have, like the content. Don't try to be something that you're not, because I think, that goes back to that experience and expertise and authority and things, like to really like just recognize like this is the perspective, this is what we're focused on. And I think that you'll get amazing results with that, and you may or may not see those in broad searches on Google, which still drives a ton of traffic. But I think that's where you'll start to get more, potential opportunity. I know we were talking about on the last podcast, like more about the flywheel or whatnot. But then, we were talking about like Gen Z and their influences, but like thinking about how AI is such an influential piece, like I think that even more so, like SEO just continues to be like a dominant requirement because of that. Like and call it whatever you want. Call it AEO, GEO, call it whatever the hell you want. It's at the end of the day, like it's making your website like have the right information in it, making sure that it's technically sound and set up correctly, like making sure that it loads properly, of course, like having those appropriate internal links and all the things that you do now. Like I just can't imagine a world where that changes so drastically because we're going to try to optimize for AI, like that suddenly AI is going to have a new way of thinking about things. I think the answers, the answer engine optimization is really, we've been doing that forever. FAQ pages and adding FAQs in there, so you have that question and answer opportunity to try to become one of the featured snippets. I mean, that's we do that all the time. So I think that'll, all that stuff continues to be valuable.
So I guess my question to that is not so much does SEO become not valuable, but as with everything when we talk about marketing, how do you show the value? If now you're optimizing more for zero click, and now you're potentially optimizing, and not by fault of like we're not doing best SEO practices,
Yep.
but now there are people who are asking these, setting up these prompts or doing these things on platforms that aren't Google, that aren't
Yep.
Bing, that aren't places that are easily accessible to track and report back on. It's like,
Yeah. That's a great point.
You showed up on a lot of queries, we think, because you have more business, but it's not in a quantifiable way for us to show you like, hey, qualitative data says this. Like you got X number of clicks, right? And I'm not saying that SEOs have to be focused on that. Like that's
No, but that's a valid point. Like, because there's always that question about justification. Like,
Right,
did
so-
I have the ROI on this like investment in SEO? Like, is there ROI there? And it is interesting because you'd probably see it as like more of a direct traffic play than you would see it in any other place, because unless you're tracking links that are clicked through AI, right? Like through which
and you'll see those referral sources.
exactly right.
But
Yeah. But it would be it will be interesting to kind of hold it, and I think Google will continue to be an interesting source of truth for that, because if like just when you run a results or an audit or something, and you're using like SEMrush or one of those tools, like it'll show you that you got hey, you're in one of the AI answer queues or whatever. And I think if you're showing up for that, the Gemini world of AI answers, then you're probably showing up in other places too. Right. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about. I'm sure people have thought about it, but I think how do you show the return on investment from that is a good question. I don't know.
Before it was like there's, as with lots of marketing, there's always ways to spin it. It was like traffic's down, but your rankings are up. So like the zero click things have had impact, or you have more impressions. So like we know you're there, or your rankings overall are down, but you're ranking for 1,000 more keywords. So that's pulling the overall average down.
Right.
Now AI is like, now it's a whole new world of how do
you see
show that value, because it's there, like intrinsically that maybe it's direct or referral traffic has gone up, or depending on the AI, like it's doing things that you can see other valuable assets in. But if you're doing marketing, you're doing probably several things.
Yeah.
And so somebody is gonna, if you're just an SEO, somebody's gonna try and steal that and be like, no, that was me over here.
Yeah,
like,
that's
that was
more
the YouTube video that got.
Keep this all in house. Yeah. No, that's a great point. That happens all the time, right? Like, oh, that was my click.
Mm-hmm.
First, middle, last attribution.
Right.
Weighted average, all that stuff. I think that's a good point too. And something that I wonder about is like that influencer stuff that we were talking about earlier. Like, how much more valuable does that become potentially as a multiplier, even with AI? Mostly because I think about how you bound the prompt. Like, so why do you choose the boundaries that you did, right? Like, and maybe that's one of the questions, is like, how do you ensure that they're bounding it so that you're the top result? Like,
I think that was interesting when you brought up like you looking at diet stuff and like you listen to certain people,
and
so on. Well, where are they getting their information from?
Sure.
So like, now you're thinking of like, if my website or my information can get to that person, and they're using, even if they're not using it verbatim, AI is now getting smart enough to realize like, oh, this is more or less what this person is saying, and here are the sources that it could have come from, because they are also saying
right.
Similar
Here's
intent.
the studies and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's an interesting thing to think about, is like, it's not just that you put it on your website, it's that it's digestible for other people who may want to speak out on it,
Right.
With just unfiltered user generated content. It's like, I really liked this product. Now obviously there's paid aspects of that too,
Right.
But you could put out a bunch of products, person picks it up, they're viral. I think about this Ryan Tries It or something, the kid who's, I don't know, actually he might not even be a kid anymore, he might be a teenager by now, but the kid who just tries a bunch of toys, and he's just kind of like a toy tester.
I feel like your references and I don't know, they're always, I don't know what the hell I'm referencing, and I never know what you're like. It's one of those, it's just funny. Like you have a lot more, I feel like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you understand the trends, like you're aware of what's trending.
I don't know if, I mean, I guess it's still trending. I have no idea. But he's a kid who tries out toys, and it just kind of blew up.
Yeah.
And so now, companies are sending him stuff.
Right.
But
I did see this, but I didn't know. The fact that you pulled his name out of a hat is pretty good.
I think it's interesting because of how, again, moving into the newer generation and how they move and adopt. And there are kids who will want that same toy that Ryan has. Cool. Everybody's like, oh, my friend has this toy. I need that toy. That's been happening for forever. Right. Now Ryan's not really your friend. He's just a kid online, so he's an influencer. But I was listening to a reel where the guy was talking about his son wanted the toy, not even to play with it, just to watch the videos with it of Ryan playing with it. Like, gotcha. Look, I got the same toy. Right. He's like, he doesn't care to, like, he's not really doing anything with it except for when the video's on.
That's awesome.
Which is kind of, how you get to, this is way off base, but like G.I. Joes and Transformers and stuff like that, where people bought them because of the cartoon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I got to sit down and watch Saturday morning cartoons like with all my G.I. Joes around me.
Right. And that's one of those things is like that you think of, it's like, hey, if only I could make a cartoon about my product that people would ingest, like how, what does that investment look like? But
I mean, there's the Barbie movie. That's
no, exactly. We were talking about that the other day. Yeah. I think I think that's really, it's fascinating. I think the one thing that, to that end, the more that I think about it too, is like something we were talking about. This was another conference I was at. It was we had a bunch of people talking about AI, and specifically that, this was for business applications in AI. And something that was interesting about what they had brought up was like, eventually, like if an AI is trained to think in a certain way or to use some kind of result as it's like, hey, whenever you get this result, that's good. And if you ever get this result, it's bad. And so if I ask you if this thing is going to be good or bad, and you can extrapolate out that it gets this result, then you know whether it's good or bad, right? Yep. Like, so, and so in theory, all of them would answer the question the same way over time if you define the way you defined the thing. One thing that without, I can't think of the term, but it's basically like when you allow AI to hallucinate intentionally, to like make it think differently than how you think, because and asking it to like use the same information that we've all had, but then think of it in a new way, like come up with a new consideration, like how does this information, like just don't think of it how we all think about it. Think about it in a way that somebody else, like that you can just extrapolate out because you have so much more information at access to. And I think that's like, I think about how does that play in when we're talking about stuff like search and SEO and influencers and all this type of stuff. Like right now, like, ultimately, almost contradicting what I said in the beginning, but just thinking about like if and when, search starts to take different things. Like right now, if it's going to give you an answer of like, what's the best thing, it's going to look to the same resources. Like, well, the best thing has the best reviews, or the best thing has the best whatever. So they're all going to, there's what's the position or argument about this is better than the other thing. But I think as more and more information is ingested and there's more of an openness to like, well, you tell me what you think the best thing would be based on not anything that we would normally think of it. Even when we talk about who's your best customer, like this was something I was talking with Dana about the other day. And, it's like, well, define that, like what is best? Yeah. Like best. They're your best customer because they keep coming back, because they're an evangelist of yours, because they write you great reviews, because they spend the most money. Like what, and is it some combination of that? Like who's, like to me, I tend to be more like, well, who's my favorite people to hang out with? But that's my best customer. They don't spend any money. I'm just kidding. But that's the, so those are things that I think, become interesting with where it could go is where, you know, if at some point that stops being important, you know, like that for it starts to we try to get it to think outside the box, if you will, that we've created, then the SEO stuff does start to fall off potentially. I don't know if there's a world where that actually happens. You know, maybe in very.
I get it though, like
yeah,
because there's the fear of AI
eclipsing us.
Well, AI has such a. I'll put it like this: so like AI, you can get basically anybody to endorse your product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we're talking about like, you know, you can create a whoever you love, right? You can have that person speak on behalf of your product and put it out in the internet.
Yeah.
And it's not infringement because it's an AI generated version of this person. And they're saying whatever you want them to. And it can go viral. And now people are like, oh, like my favorite actor is talking about this product that maybe I need, maybe I don't.
Right.
But now I'm locked into it. So now I'm searching for it. Now I'm, you know, and it flies off the shelf.
Yeah.
I saw an AI imagery on social media, actually this morning on my flight here. And it was Patrick Mahomes saving some person on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
It was very clearly AI.
Yeah.
But the comments didn't all seem to understand that it was AI.
Right.
Like the first picture, the guy's face is kind of distorted. It's like,
Yeah.
People don't look quite like that. And in the next photo, guy's in more or less the same position, but Patrick Mahomes has a completely different outfit
on. Nice.
And then in the next photo, it's Mahomes standing with his kids and his wife, and he has another different outfit on. So it's like,
and he's got 3 fingers.
Yeah, like none of it really matched up. But if you look at the comments, some people are like, this is very clearly AI. And some people are like, Patrick Mahomes is a hero and needs to be given the keys to the city.
Right.
I'm not saying he doesn't fall somewhere in between there.
Right.
But I guess he's not AI. So, but I mean, like, it's just, you can create things to spark interest and drive more results via, you know, if you're like, all right, we have this campaign that we want to run, but we can't afford to get, I don't know, Katy Perry, but we can afford to fake Katy Perry.
Right.
Well,
and that's funny that you say that, because you know, I know there is a lot of the main AIs have like things in there to try to prevent you from doing that. But it's funny you say that, because it's always like, you know, we talk about this with SEO a lot, right? Like it's bad to do until it's like, it's like, you know, do you do these black hat like things in order to like get your rankings up? Like
no, but I'm gray. Like I'll
exactly. Like and that's because it's like, until Google runs an update to actually penalize you for it, you know, it's like, you could tell me that I shouldn't do this, but I'm ranked number 1, so I'm going to keep doing it until you make it so that I shouldn't do it. And so that's like the same kind of thing, right? Like it's like at some point this will be like, you know, probably some way to like identify it or whatever very quickly, and then, you know, it'll be its own thing of like, hey, like spam, you know, it's like I can't, you know, this is considered, you know, false or not true. And
or it goes the opposite direction and allows it to happen. Just like NBA playoffs and the gather step. I will die on this hill. I hate that. I hate it so much. I hate it. But now you see it all the time. So you get like 9 different steps in between.
Yeah, right.
But yeah.
Travel what?
Travels are just gone.
Yeah, you just run down the court. I think that's or it becomes mainstream and then everybody's doing it, but
you have a way to either understand it or you're like, I don't care that it's fake. Like I don't care that they're using until there's too many lawsuits or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, and those are the questions, like at what point, and then what are the damages and what, you know, all these kinds of things. But I think, you know, and that's where, you know, there's always some risk about being the first one to try something, and then, you know, once they, you know, you get it done, and then it's like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. I go back to cars a lot with that.
Yeah.
There were a lot of car commercials will use like somebody impersonating like a famous person, right?
Yep.
Like that has been a thing for a while on the radio. But you can tell it's not whoever they say it is.
Yeah.
But now you want to bring back James Earl Jones to speak on behalf of your business, like
Yeah.
There's no real way other than he's not here to tell that he's not speaking on behalf of your business.
No, it is. It's that's interesting. I wonder if as those things, just as each one of these things kind of evolve, like what that looks like in the future. What that opportunity is like for somebody who's savvy enough and thinks about like, oh, how could I leverage this, and then. Even with all the AI generated content and all that kind of stuff, like how does that, as it gets mixed into the results and like this made up content, and then, they talk about that. One thing that was brought up in the conference was about the value of steel pre-World War II versus after World War II because of basically pre or post the atomic bomb changes the nature of steel. So there was a discussion about whether or not data will be valuable pre or post AI, with the idea that obviously before it wouldn't have been able to be tainted by this thing, whereas after now it could be just made up stuff that got entered into the database. So it was an interesting conversation. And again, it's like, what is how do we suss these things out in order to get the right information or I want to say truth, but I feel like that's like what seems to be also open to interpretation these days. So, trying to decide like what, at the end of the day, it's like just trying to decide what's right. And I go back to those AI bounds, it's like, I'm like, look, I don't want you to listen to everybody. Like I want you to listen to these 10 people that I think are right. And then give me advice or give me results or focus on those things as opposed to the, just looking at the entire internet for information, like I don't think in this case, like it's not the stock market and doing the fund that invests in all of them is like a better, granted it, might be safer, maybe whatever, and give you some kind of indication of an okay thing. Like, but there's so much garbage, I think, out there that this, the collective doesn't seem to be better in a lot of ways. And so, and that goes again back to the SEO thing. Like, what do we do in order to determine whether a website's more valuable, more better? And it's the EAT, right? Like, so that's the, I keep going back to that. And I think that right now that's right. And then we'll have to watch as things evolve because they're, like I said, like if we start figuring out like new ways for it to think about information, and so it can abandon, like it gets better results by abandoning the current models, like then that would definitely change the way that you would think about how you would leverage stuff. But yeah, I think you just wait and see what that looks like, because right now I just feel like that we're getting, and at the end of the day, if you're a business or somebody that cares about this stuff, like it doesn't matter what's going to happen necessarily, right? Like it will, like you want to be mindful of it, but it's just like the black hat tactics, right? Like it was like, hey, I'm number one right now and it's getting me paid. So like I'm going to keep doing them until I get punished for it. But, in the near term, like I'm going to do whatever I can to make the money that I can make right now, because, it's like, it'd be great if I'm set up correctly for some future instance or whatever, but you got to be able to survive that long.
Yeah. I feel like even with AI, like it's all built on a foundation. So if you're talking about SEO, everything's built on a proper foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So like you start off with the right foundation, evolving is not going to be as hard as if you're like, I got to find the advantage of something in the future.
Right.
Yes, you want to be probably an early adopter to some of those things, but even those come with like some understanding of conventional, typically.
Yep.
And I kind of put that in context of life. Like it's a lot easier to find the new strategy, new thing, new best way of doing something if you've been doing the best version of the best practices for a while.
Yep.
You can like, okay, like here's an opportunity. Not going from zero to like, I'm going to just wing it and throw something, hopefully it sticks on the dartboard.
That's a good point. Yeah. You'll definitely be in a way better position to take advantage if you're already doing everything that you should have been doing from the beginning. So I think at the end of the day, like the point is like SEO is not going anywhere, and all the stuff that we've been saying to do from the beginning is still valid.
Yeah.
Like that's what it comes down to. And if anything, like your results may start showing up in different ways because your information is bound by this parameter. And I think like if that's the case, all the more reason to just like don't try to broaden your content too much, because if you want to be, if they want to put a persona on it and you fall into that grouping that somebody bounded on, don't make it hard to know that.
Yeah.
Like I want the person who's an expert in this, assuming you're an expert in this, tell me these results, like means that, like own your content and make sure that it's valuable, and don't try to broaden it to 100 other things where it's going to be like, is this person really an expert on this, or they're a jack of all trades and a master of none? I think that's the thought process right now.